Hey everyone, happy April Fool's Day. Unfortunately, this year I guess we'll have to be telling jokes to ourselves unless you live with somebody. But I was just thinking about frustrations I've had in the past, and when I look back at it, they're funny now. So it makes me realize that we really should enjoy our moments before they become memories, no matter how silly or how frustrating or how annoying or how much somebody upset you, and because they'll never happen the same way again. I was in fourth grade at the time. Our family had just gotten a computer. I think it was a Mac, Mac One or Mac Two. I can't remember. But it had this weird bug, which is that you needed the operating system in order to eject the floppy disk. We were using 3¼ inch floppy disk. And it's normally not a problem because as soon as you shut down the computer will eject the disk. But one day the power had gone out in the house, so the computer shut off very abruptly. And when I turned on the computer, it said that I had a non-system disk in the drive, and told me to eject the disk and then restart. And I couldn't, because the eject feature was in the operating system itself. And I was so desperate to get on the computer for some reason that I pried the disk out of the drive with a screwdriver. I think I put a screwdriver just wedging it underneath the disk so that the computer couldn't read the disk. And finally it came back on, and that was good. But in the process I destroyed the disk. I don't remember if the disk drive still worked after that, but the disk that I had in there was completely toast after I had done that. Not long after that, I wrote my first computer program. Well, actually, I wrote my very first one even before that, but not long after that, I started to do more advanced things, and I naively thought the computer had infinite amounts of memory. Just naively, that you could just keep using more and more and more and more memory. And I think I wrote a computer program to calculate thousands of digits of pi. Around the same time, I was starting to learn calculus by myself. And I started to write something that would calculate huge numbers, if I remember correctly. And I naively thought the computer had all the memory in the world to do that. And I think I must have used millions of digits. You gotta remember, at the time, computers had a few hundred kilobytes of RAM at most. The hard disk was like 10 to 20 megabytes. I had no idea what that meant. So that's why I naively thought you could just store as big a number as you were, as big an array as you wanted. Behind the scenes, what probably happened was the computer was writing all that stuff to the disk. And when I restarted the computer, there was not enough disk to boot. And so the computer said, "Disk read error." And my dad was so upset at me. He doesn't know very much about computer science, but he knows that I experiment way too much. I used to have that big problem that I would experiment too much. So when I was in second grade, so much before a few years before I had done any of this, I used to confuse two of my classmates, and I would call them the wrong name. And eventually, after I sorted out who was who, I decided to keep calling them the wrong name because it was so funny to me. You know, I was in second grade, and it just gave a little cheer to that I was around them and that I was calling them the wrong name. And one of my classmates didn't mind. The other classmate got very upset. He would go, "My name is so-and-so, it's not so-and-so." And we would be arguing about this, and the other classmate, he would hear us talking about this from halfway across the classroom, and he would be like, "Oh, maybe he's talking about me," you know, as if I would talk to somebody halfway across the classroom. I think he just wanted to find a way to resolve all of this because we were arguing all the time about the situation. My last year at school, where I was working on my PhD, I had a really frustrating situation because I was dating a girl that I had known online, and we had met up a few times for, you know, just for a meal or just to see a movie or something like that. And then one morning, she calls me at about 4 or 5 a.m. asking me to go to her apartment immediately. And I got really excited. I had a feeling I knew what she was up to. And unfortunately, at the time, I didn't drive very much because I had an office where I was working on my PhD, and I was actually living inside the office. I had lost my apartment due to some unfortunate circumstances of 6 months before I had met that girl, and I just never looked for another place to live because I kind of didn't have to. And I would just leave my car parked at the campus, and that was that. And I didn't go very far away from the campus most of the time, so the car was literally stuck there forever. And it had snowed, there was ice, and when I finally got out at 5 a.m. that morning to go to her home, the car was stuck for good. I put my foot on the accelerator, and I must have held it there 10-15 minutes. And finally, the car flew out of the parking spot. But when I got to her apartment, all I wanted to talk about was how my car was stuck. And so we lost all the mood to do whatever she wanted to do. And it turns out I didn't do that with any girl for another 6.5 years. So I kind of found myself in other ways, and that was that. Okay, I used to cause a lot of trouble as a kid. When I was in... I think I was in 5th grade at this time. My family and I had gone to this food festival event. It was in downtown Pittsburgh in the convention center. And, you know, at the time, I was an introvert. I had a hard time interacting with anybody at the food festival. Okay, so I go to the bathroom at the food festival, and I turn on the sink to wash my hands. And when I turned the sink all the way up, I noticed some of the water would splash out onto the floor. And I just thought that was really funny. And I left the water like that. I went back to the festival. Then I went back to the festival to brag about how I had caused the computer to crash from using so much virtual memory. I bragged about various chemistry experiments I had done at home. That's the kind of stuff that I often talk about when I'm amongst other people, because I don't know anything else to talk about. Next thing I know, I see janitors surrounding the bathroom. I'm cleaning up the mess, and I had to bite my lips to keep from laughing. I think I was in 7th grade at this time. I used to have a habit of drinking a lot of soda, and actually I just got some. I just got some natural soda sweetened with Zevia, because now that everybody's focusing on toilet paper, this was like on sale. But I used to drink a lot of conventional soda. And we would go, my family and I, we would go to Burger King, and I would get a cup of soda, and I would refill it 20, 30 times. And it made a fool of myself. My parents hated to take me to Burger King, but they would still take me there to reward me. If I got a good grade or if I behaved, they would take me there, right? And one time we had gone there, and, you know, like I said, I used to be an introvert, so my parents would let me practice interacting with the cashier, so I would go up to order. And one time I had paid for the order, and I got my change. I used to like to collect coins, so I would always be curious to look at the coins when I got the change. And to my dismay, the cashier had given me a Canadian quarter. And I knew it was worth considerably less than a US quarter. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the Canadian dollar was like 60 cents US. And I used to pay attention to that, by the way. I love the idea of investing in coins, and I used to pay attention to that. And just as I was about to complain to the cashier, she had closed the cash register and couldn't open it without another order. And I was starting to get upset. I started to raise my voice when my parents pulled me away from the desk. You know, they didn't want me to make a scene about it. And my parents were like, you come here and drink like 5 gallons of soda every time. Just let it go. It's only 10, 20 cents. You know, let it go. And, well, I guess I went to refill my soda a few extra times that time to make up for it. And then I kind of forgot about it. Of course, 20 years later, I remember the cost of all the soda I drink. You know, the fact that I still have health problems today, and the fact that I spent a lot of time losing all the weight that I gained at the time. That's a bigger loss than the quarter, obviously. But then I had some good memories. My best memory was when I was in 8th grade. We had a textbook for school, and we had to cover it with book covering. And by this time, I was also going to college part-time. And during some of the high school classes where, you know, I was just bored out of my mind, I would take a pencil eraser and rub it across the book covering to erase all the coloring off of the book cover. And it drove my teacher crazy. I was just bored. You know, we were talking about things that I had known years ago, and I was just bored. And eventually I erased most of the color off of the book covering, but there were a few patches of really solid cover that you couldn't get off of the book covering. And I remember during class I would just keep challenging myself to erase it. And finally, because I was taking a chemistry course at this time, I was going to college part-time, I was taking a chemistry course, and I thought, hey, maybe I'll try some chemicals. And so I tried hydrogen peroxide, and it kind of loosened the color a little bit, but I only had 3% hydrogen peroxide, that's the problem. And when that didn't work, I tried bleach. And unfortunately, the bleach caused the book covering to just disintegrate. And the following Monday, I went back to the high school, and my classmate looked at the book covering and said, "What'd you do to your book covering?" And I said it was EPB. Eraser, peroxide, and bleach. That's what I called the process. And my classmates spent a whole day trying to figure out what EPB meant, and I didn't tell them until the end of the day. And everybody laughed, including the teacher, who thought I was crazy for doing any of this. Anyways, it makes me wonder what I'm doing today that 20 years from now I will wish I had enjoyed more, even though today I'm finding to be frustrating. So if you're stuck at home, if you're quarantined, or if you're lonely, try to think in that regard. Thanks for watching.